Good morning. We welcome you to today's webinar on behalf of Vivid. Today's topic is 5 steps to a more effective QA automation in a DevOps environment. This webinar is brought to you by Turnkey Solutions. And was to be hosted by Bernard, but unfortunately Bernard was unable to join us, so I'll introduce our speakers for today. I'm Daniel Gannon. I'm President and CEO of Turnkey Solutions, software company. And I'm joined by Jamie Kurt. And Jamie is a manager of our global sales engineering team. Jamie, you want to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I just joined Turnkey here in the last month or so, and been using their software in previous positions that I've held, and been a part of QA for a long time in my career. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Jamie. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. This is a live session. It's being recorded. The recordings will be available afterwards to all Vivid members. And for Q&A, I think everyone is on silent at this point. Please type your questions as we go along into the questions pane, and we have time set aside at the conclusion to answer questions. So that's the best way to communicate. You'll see the webinar control panel. This is where you'll enter your questions, etc. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, our topic today is 5 steps to a more effective QA automation in a DevOps environment. And I want to mention that you'll see in your control panel pane that there is a link to a white paper that you can click on and download. It will be available afterwards as well, but that's probably the easiest way to access the white paper that also talks about this topic. So just a brief introduction to Turnkey before we get started. We're some of the leaders in scriptless test automation, and we'll talk about why effective test automation tools are important in this QA automation for DevOps. But just a bit about us. We're a privately held company based in beautiful Denver, Colorado, and we do have offshore operations in India. Our test automation tools are focused on functional testing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But, you know, tools available to both technical and non-technical users. So these are important concepts that we'll introduce as we talk about DevOps today. So before we get started into the meat of this, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the keys that are driving business applications and why the need for some of these shifts in methodology. I think we'd all agree that we live today in what I'll call an application economy. Businesses of all kinds rely on software applications to drive their businesses, whether it be point of sale, supply chain, distribution, finance. More and more applications really drive all of commerce. And the other dynamic is that the velocity of business pace has dramatically increased. And companies of all sizes, from the enterprise to very small companies, have to keep pace in order to remain competitive. You see new competitors spin up very quickly with new services that threaten old line corporations, and effectively managing both new application development and the maintenance of existing applications is increasingly essential to remain viable and competitive. So one of the challenges is to speed that innovation and creation without sacrificing quality. We know that companies that experience poor quality from providers can much more easily now change providers, very easily without any disruption of business. So remaining competitive and viable is more essential than ever. So with that, I'm going to ask Jamie to talk a little bit about the current state of software development, sort of software development life cycles, and what a move or a shift that DevOps starts to look like. So Jamie? Oh, yeah, before we do that, I'm sorry, I have a polling question. So before Jamie gets started, first polling question today is, what is the biggest issue in software development that keeps you up at night? And I think you can all see the questions on the screen. So the poll is open, and you can go ahead and vote. Jamie, if you'll manage closing the poll when we have enough responses, and then you can take over in the software development lifecycle process.
Sure, you bet, Dan. Yeah, we're getting quite a few responses in. We'll let it stay open for a few minutes here. Okay, we'll give it another maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds here, and we'll close out the poll in just a few seconds. Okay, so looking at the results right now, looks like 37% selected the defects leaking into production as our largest category. Then next to that is 29% in integration of QA and development. And then the third one with 20% is delivering solutions to market faster. So those are our results. Kind of big, not a big surprise here with the defects leaking into production as one of the most important things. So we definitely address that and cover that in our future slides here. So I just wanted to start out by, again, welcoming everybody. And my name is Jamie Kurt, and I am the Manager of Global Sales Engineering at Turnkey Solutions in Denver, Colorado. And thank you for your time today. So let's set the stage here by talking about the software development lifecycle and the traditional waterfall approach model. Typically, the software development cycle spans 1 to 4 years, while the maintenance phase spans an additional 5 to 15 years for many applications. This traditional waterfall approach pushes feature completion first with gated approvals, followed by lengthy QA testing and bug fixing cycles that drive up costs. Long development cycles, silos, and lack of visibility and collaboration are not sustainable in today's world of having to change rapidly in order to keep up with competitors and customer demands at the same time keeping quality high and cost low. So we have an example here of an ERP system upgrade that followed the traditional waterfall approach. It was a 9-month project. They had 7 manual testing cycles or iterations. In total, they executed over 4,500 manual test cases. Although the knowledge and skills were within the test team, they were heavily reliant on the business to provide testing resources. A team of 20 testers comprised of business users were required for a 12-week end-to-end user acceptance test cycle, removing them from their day-to-day roles and responsibilities. In today's world, this is not acceptable, as it can cause business interruptions and in some cases require backfill and costly temp workers. So System Sciences Institute at IBM has reported that the cost to fix an error found after product release is 4 to 5 times as much as one uncovered during the design phase, and up to 100 times more than one identified in the maintenance phase. Not to mention, when errors leak into production, there are unknown costs that have negative impact on your corporate brand. For example, in April of 2015, Starbucks had a register malfunction due to an internal failure during a routine refresh. Over 60% of their stores in the US and Canada were forced to close, and the stores that remained open were unable to process payments and were forced to give coffee away for free. Over the past 2 years, Nissan has been recalling airbags for over 1 million cars due to a glitch in the airbag sensory detectors. Passenger seat airbags would not deploy. So far, 2 accidents have been reported due to this software failure. In June of 2015, the Royal Bank of Scotland encountered a glitch where 600,000 payments were not processed as planned. It took several days for these transactions to get completed. Additionally, in 2012, the same company was fined over £65 million for a similar occurrence. As the previous examples show, not only do defects leaking into the production environment increase timelines, costs, and complexity to find the root cause, in today's technology-savvy world, any failure has the potential to go viral on numerous websites and media outlets that will ultimately threaten your corporate brand and customer loyalty. So the big question becomes, how do you increase SDLC velocity as you deal with increasingly complex applications while still preventing defects from escaping into production and keeping costs low? In conclusion, putting in place more effective quality assurance with test automation in DevOps can help address all of these issues by significantly reducing timelines, costs, and increasing test coverage and quality. A move to DevOps demands increased test velocity, flexibility, and agility in order to meet the requirements of rapid and frequent software iterations. These demands require a paradigm shift from the old waterfall model. First, with shorter development cycles or sprints. Next, teams need to become highly collaborative, breaking down any silos and barriers that will allow BAs, developers, QA, and operations to work together from the early planning stages all the way through to release and support. Then ultimately, giving greater visibility across all teams to the requirements and business process logic to be implemented. And most importantly, fostering improved quality throughout the SDLC process by engaging all teams, especially QA, earlier in the process. So by gathering input from all teams early and often, collaboration will eliminate the silos between teams, improving communication to ensure everyone is working toward the same goal: rapid releases with high quality at a low cost. Now I will hand it back to Dan to talk about what is DevOps. Dan?
Thank you, Jamie. So we talked a little bit about standard processes and a move to DevOps. And one of the questions I like to ask people is, what is your view of DevOps? And I would say that if you ask 100 people what DevOps is, you're probably going to get 100 slightly different answers. So I think that, the truth is that although you can find DevOps on Wikipedia and it does a decent job of explaining kind of at least a generic view of what it is, I don't think that there really is a single commonly accepted definition. And quite frankly, there can be, depending on who you talk to, significant disagreement among proponents about what exactly it means and how it works. So I did assemble a couple of things that I think do a pretty good job of putting some boundaries in and driving, at least a concept of what we think it is. So, the first is DevOps is a tighter relationship between the developers of applications and the IT department that tests and deploys them, and DevOps is said to be at the intersection, or really, we'll talk about integration and collaboration of software engineering, quality assurance, and operations. And I think that does a really nice job because, if you think about the term DevOps, it talks about development and operations, but it's somewhat silent on the topic of quality assurance, which is, of course, an integral part of the process. So the second statement we have here is, it's more about pursuing the implementation of technologies and processes, organizational styles that fit business needs. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all, but provides some direction about your roadmap and how to get there that may in fact be different than other IT organizations. So unlike, say, Agile development, which is much more specific and rigid, DevOps is more of a concept I think that can be applied. And the next question or logical question is, why? Why do DevOps? And most people will say that it boils down to faster delivery of applications, of updates without sacrificing quality. So the integration of these disciplines leads to a better result and faster result. So we'll use that as our standard definition, if you will, for the remainder of our discussion today. So when we talk about that sort of definition of DevOps, it means integration and collaboration. It means moving testing process further to the left or earlier in the process, so it's fully integrated. So testing becomes then involved in all phases of the software development lifecycle. Test planning gets started at the beginning of the project rather than at a handoff point, and testing, in fact, then becomes part of the full development process. I should say what it isn't, and there are some people who view it this way. It isn't a matter of simply dropping testing on top of the development organization. We don't want to trivialize the skills and expertise and process that professional QA organizations exert in the process, and that ownership of quality at the end result. So it isn't a removal of formal QA, but rather an integration of that process through the planning, analysis, design, code and build, and then finally formal testing. So in terms of having a framework, it's not a software framework, but really it's a process framework to support DevOps with integrated QA. They're really, you're looking at three major pillars, if you will. Collaboration is absolutely critical. As we just said, if you're going to integrate those processes and you're going to integrate those various unique skills and expertise, it really requires you have a comprehensive team that supports all of those certain capabilities. There has to be a thorough review of requirements and obviously not just frequent, but really ongoing communication. So collaboration is key to make this work. Integration of processes, having a single platform that can be used. I had a conversation with an industry expert the other day that talked about development process where one part of the team used Microsoft Azure, the other part of the team used Amazon AWS, and there were simply process issues that prevented, this from working seamlessly. So, that's a critical element, including end-to-end meaningful use tests that everybody understands contribute to the final result. And of course, as we said earlier, testing as early as possible in the process and making those tools useful throughout the whole process and reusable. Finally, not just automation tools, but the right automation tools are absolutely essential to making this work. They have to simplify test creation and maintenance. You're not going to find developers writing script-based tests to test code and functionality early in the process. So we need to find tools that are useful across all of these different disciplines that are reusable and support, a number of different scenarios. So that leads us to question number 2. What percentage of your software development today, if you know, uses DevOps? Jamie, I'll let you open the poll.
Okay. Yep, we've got the poll open, and we'll give it a few minutes here to collect everyone's answers. Okay, we'll give it about another 10 seconds here. All right, if we want to go ahead and close out the poll. So the results have come in, and not surprisingly, about 37% are in the 0 to 10% bracket, 30% in the 11 to 25% bracket, and the remaining 21% or so, the largest group, in the 26 to 50% bracket.
That's great. It sounds like we've those numbers are actually a little surprising to me because I think we have greater adoption than perhaps I expected. So it'd be interesting to see the questions at the end and how people are actually using this and how successful they are. So let's talk about 5 steps to more effective QA and DevOps. After all, that was the title of our presentation, so we finally got into it. So if you think about DevOps, it's just at the center of development, quality, and operations, of course, as we said. And these 5 steps that we talked about, we're going to go into some detail each of those. Obviously there's a starting point. My recommendation generally when I talk to people is that starting small and embracing the process, developing and refining that process to work in your environment, testing out various forms of collaboration and platforms, and making it work really, really well on a small scale before pushing out on a broader scale is really important. And of course, that means finding the right automated testing solutions in order to support each of the disciplines through that process. This should, of course, lead to faster application delivery. But in that process, as you integrate quality throughout the entire process and are able to shift that from the end of the processes in a waterfall to an integrated process and shift it left, you should see quality integration with development. And at the end of the day, to make it all work, the glue that makes it work is greater collaboration. So we're going to dig into each of those steps a little bit. So if you look at the traditional roles of software development, you've got, of course, the development people. They're focused on new application development, change, improvement, the hardcore, development. Quality then is you typically handed off that work, and their job is to ensure changes are stable, bug-free, that the application works as expected, and that it won't result in production outages, bad customer experience, et cetera. And then operations, of course, operates these applications, outruns the business, and it centers really around stability. I want everything to work and work seamlessly as it's intended to be. And of course, this process, as the picture depicts, is circular, and you go through, resulting change and improvement again. So in order to effectively implement DevOps as part of this process or modify that process to include DevOps, quality has to be a focus of the entire team. It's no longer the QA team's sole responsibility at the end of a process, but rather, as we mentioned, it's integrated in. So it includes the developer, includes the BAs, and includes, of course, the QA team, which doesn't go away. Everybody has to be familiar with the release in all of its concepts and be part of the initial planning. So rather than being sequential, again, it's integrated, which includes constant communication, information exchange, and leveraging effective ALM tools to collect all this information and have be a central hub or repository of the information, which facilitates communication, review, and planning. So if you look at the bar at the lower part of the slide, there's a planning process. Requirements are developed, which involves the business people. Then development occurs. Design. There's system integration tests, and of course, ongoing application maintenance. The tools we talked about, ALM tools. This is one example that provides a collecting point and provides visibility across the entire team, so that everyone can see the same information, see the same results, and ultimately everyone's on the same page. And the process should move then in an integrated fashion throughout. So with that, I'm going to ask Jamie to step back in and talk about the whole concept of shifting left, integrating quality into the development process.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Let's go ahead and take a look at this second step. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So shift left is the process of designing, planning, and implementing tests very early within a sprint, and keeping QA activity moving along parallel with the development process. We want to develop the plan and focus the scope. Preparation is key. If you take the time during your planning and design phases to answer these questions, what tests do you need to meet your quality goals, and what needs to be automated versus ran manually, you can ensure your requirements are testable and that testing is top of mind during the planning and design phases. In Dan's Quality-Driven DevOps white paper, he references a quote from Stephen Vance's book, Quality Code, Software Testing Principles and Practice, that I feel drives this point home. Of all the practices you can leverage to assist your craftsmanship, you will benefit most from testing. So ultimately, we want all teams involved in the DevOps process to own the quality of the software and be accountable for the quality of the software. Next, setting up the environment. If you identify and plan your environment needs, such as test data, roles, and responsibilities early on, this will benefit DevOps teams in the early test phases by saving time, preventing delays, and identifying environmental defects earlier where they can be fixed at a lower cost. Then focus on building blocks for testing. As objects are created and checked in, the basic building blocks of modern-day test automation can be created and utilized to test individual components earlier in the life cycle and identify impacts that defects have on end users. Why is it important to take the time to set up automation in the early phases? Because it saves time and effort down the road. By investing up front, a QA-infused DevOps team can avoid spending a lot more time and money fixing things in later SDLC phases. The question of what to test requires upfront analysis and planning in order to pinpoint areas that represent the largest business risk and value. Identifying the business critical scenarios is key to ensure you are targeting your testing in those high risk areas and not wasting valuable time and money testing non-critical processes or even over-testing other processes. This slide provides an initial list of questions to ask yourself to help identify what tests reflect a meaningful use of the system. What would cause the company to lose money? What would cause the company to lose business? What is the environment in which I need to run my tests? For more mature applications, what types of issues are escaping the testing process into production? What are the high-risk end-to-end business processes? And finally, what are the processes that your business runs every day and would not be able to open its doors to conduct business if they were not working? Testing is conducted to ensure an application or multiple applications are able to perform the business processes and logic they were built for. Are they working as expected and meeting the defined business requirements? As more and more objects are delivered, automated test cases can be strung together, building full end-to-end meaningful use tests that ensure business processes and logic are working as expected. End-to-end business processes most likely involve multiple systems, from mobile applications to ERP enterprise applications to mainframe and ultimately even homegrown applications. And the modern day test automation tools make it possible to automate across these different applications. Now, step 3, accelerate application delivery. In early releases of software, it is difficult to build full end-to-end automation test cases. But with today's advanced test automation software, like Turnkey cFactory, building automation at smaller component levels, like individual screens, QA-infused DevOps teams can create scriptless and reusable components when first developing the user interface layer to detect defects in the code base. Then in later releases, as more components of the interface layer are delivered, QA-infused DevOps teams can come in and take the building blocks created initially and enhance those test suites to string together end-to-end workflows to test full business processes and logic that will identify defects within an application or even defects in application-to-application interactions. Ultimately, these end-to-end automated test cases can then be reused by the QA-infused DevOps team as a mature regression bed to ensure future releases do not break existing functionality. The ease of stringing together modern-day test automation components and reconfiguring them accelerates application delivery by shortening test cycles as well as improves test coverage over manual and traditional record and playback path-locked automation and delivering increased ROI within projects. DevOps and QA working together by defining testable requirements, identifying what is changing from build to build, updating existing test cases as changes are implemented, and ultimately identifying data, role, and access requirements necessary to test different business processes and logic. Testing needs to be involved in all phases of the SDLC process. Test planning should start from the beginning of the project. Once the testable requirements are baseline, system and user acceptance test plans and test cases should be prepared. which will also help in uncovering any gaps and/or defects in the defined requirements. Test preparation should be done before actual testing starts, documenting any defects found throughout the planning and design phases as well. As you move forward and complete design, you should complete the integration testing cases and also, to some extent, unit test cases, ensuring that testing becomes a part of the development process as well. Okay, moving on to step 4, add scriptless testing to your QA stack. Over time, as software programs change, the software complexity increases, architecture and structure deteriorate, unless specific effort is undertaken to mitigate this deterioration. Software maintenance cost estimates range from 50 to 75% of the overall software lifecycle cost. As the graph on this slide indicates, the usability of automated test cases rapidly decreases over time as an application changes, thus making maintenance of traditional record and playback automation test cases extremely time-consuming and costly. DevOps requires QA solutions that are extremely agile, allowing for test cases to be easily and rapidly maintained and adapted to the needs of a new iteration. Turnkey cFactory is one example of a tool that meets these DevOps requirements by automating the maintenance of automated test cases. In order to overcome rapidly decreasing usability of automated test cases, you need a tool that is truly application aware. This is why Turnkey cFactory tool is able to automate the maintenance of automated test cases. As this slide's animation depicts, we have an application on the left and the highlighted screen is changed. That individual screen translates to a single component used in many test cases and test sets. Turnkey cFactory is able to inspect the updated screen and update the individual screen component. Once those updates are saved, the updates are instantly reflected in whatever test cases and test sets that component is used in. Application-aware testing helps to automatically create tests and update keyword-driven test components based on application-specific parameters and best practices. This capability not only significantly reduces the time to create test cases, but it also detects what has changed, allowing test cases to be updated quickly and efficiently for each new iteration, ensuring minimal delays in the DevOps process. Additionally, Turnkey cFactory leverages a data-driven approach, separating tests from the data used to drive test flows. This method provides the agility to run multiple test data sets with a single test case, far better than the old path-locked, hard-coded scripted automation approach. This slide shows the requisition business process that flows through the identified screens and is dependent on the test data used. This data-driven approach allows us to create and maintain a single master test case. As the slide's animation plays out, it drives home the automation data-driven approach. Depending on the test data scenario supplied in the data sheet, the data determines the flow through the different screens. So with cFactory's data-driven approach, I am able to execute the different screen flows for test data scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on with a single test case, and therefore I only have to maintain a single test case as well as the application changes in future releases. From a DevOps perspective, this is critical for increasing test coverage, agility, and quality in shorter timelines and at a lower cost. Visibility and control in the QA process is critical to ensure projects are meeting timeline and quality goals from a DevOps perspective. Automating meaningful use test cases to cover the business critical scenarios ensures confidence in product quality. Automated regression test sets built over each sprint and release can give a sense of whether application quality is increasing throughout the software lifecycle. By expanding test automation coverage from release to release, you can measure the time to release savings with each iteration, which ultimately helps you determine your progress of building a DevOps culture by ensuring efficiency of the teams in their testing velocity and defect backlog. These metrics can all be reported from HPALM and give organizations visibility into the full SDLC lifecycle from requirements definition, test script execution, and defect tracking. Additionally, closing the loop by tying testing results and defects back to the requirements. Now I will hand it back over to Dan to talk about step 5, identifying the business case, and to wrap up the presentation. Take it away, Dan.
Thank you, Jamie. Before I talk about cost justification and, why invest, I'd like to revisit the first polling question. And I think it's telling that the number one voted polling question, or the most important issue that keeps people up at night, is still defects leaking into production. So the need for quality never goes away. And, the second most important issue was the integration of QA and development, which of course relates directly to point number 1. How do you drive QA through the development process to prevent defects from leaking into production? And delivering solutions to market faster was a distant third. I think that's always a desire, but it underscores the necessity to focus on quality as part of the process and not just speed. So from a cost justification perspective, or really a business case perspective, why do companies invest in this sort of process and the tools and the training and all of the other things that are important to make this shift from traditional development to sort of DevOps environment? And I think number 1, of course, is to find a way to accelerate time to value. We talked a little bit about the pace and velocity of business today. Applications are built and delivered and in production faster than ever before. And even mainline applications such as ERP applications rapidly evolve to meet the needs and demands of an ever-changing business landscape. So accelerating time to value is not just an important business objective, but it's a critical differentiator in most companies' marketplace. So faster time to test means a faster mean time to repair, and ultimately the goal is quicker time to market with applications. And no longer is it acceptable to have critical business needs that are held up because of a slow, laborious process and lengthy quality process to deliver. Other companies are delivering faster, and to keep pace, it's critical that you are able to keep up with that sort of process. But of course, at the same time, it's not free. So finding ways to reduce costs and to streamline this process is important to justify the expense and the effort. So this occurs by real efficiency gained in implementation of the 5 steps that we talked about. It should require fewer resources. More importantly, it should minimize missed market opportunities. Faster to market means quicker time to revenue. And, enables you to leverage current tools, perhaps, and team members, but integrate them, have them function in a more collaborative fashion. At the end of the day, as our polling question indicated, we still need to ensure higher quality. We can't sacrifice quality at the altar of speed, and continue to focus on reducing issues that sort of escape into production or production outages is very important. Of course, building and maintaining, developing a broader set of test coverage to minimize that risk is also an important objective as part of this process, because it leads directly to customer satisfaction, customer retention, higher revenues, and just greater brand visibility. So if you add these up, it really comes back to the age-old adage of faster, cheaper, but still better. And that's how you justify these. Again, I advocate starting small, refining the process, perfecting the process before moving it on for bigger and broader application environments. But I think that the concepts espoused here work really well in virtually every development environment if you follow the 5 steps. Just a couple of customer testimonials, where this process has been implemented and works really well. This is a global pharmaceutical, biotech manufacturing, and software development organization. The quote here, regression testing took a team of almost 20 people over 12 weeks, typically, to run manual tests. So this was a sequential process. Perhaps even more damaging was the need for significant business support, pulling a business analyst, other people out of the business, high-value employees away from their daily roles and responsibilities. So the impact to the business went beyond simply the development and the QA organization. So by adopting this process, an integration of these disciplines, tests that once took 12 weeks, now estimated to run end-to-end, completely pervasively in 2 to 3 days, and the team that has to do that has been reduced to 2 persons at the end of that process. So very, very, very significant. Now, the 2-person team is the one at the very end. There are other people from the QA organization who are now integrated into the process that make this a reality. So shortened cycles and better quality. One other testimonial is the Fortune 500 healthcare services company. They've measured, and this is in the initial stages of implementation, a 35% time savings when developing tests. Think about how significant that is. And a 25% reuse of these fundamental components through that process that Jamie described, from very early in the first iteration throughout the entire process to the end. So this is a really quick transition, and the shift left process has worked extremely well, and they're seeing the results of that very quickly. So these are the kinds of things that you can expect to see if you're able to adopt the principles of QA-driven DevOps. So with that, we're going to open for questions. And I think you'll see in your chat bar where you can enter your questions in, and I think, Jamie, you'll be responsible for selecting those questions, and we'll determine which of us should respond to those.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we've got a initial list started up here from the attendees, and so one of the first questions we have here is, how do you implement DevOps in a large, cumbersome enterprise-grade environment, for example, like SAP?
Well, Jamie, you want that, or do you want me to handle it? Maybe I'll take that.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be good.
Certainly. Again, I really advocate starting small and perfecting and refining the processes. So often people will find a project, an application, or a group or team to begin this process and really define it out from the very beginning and have a methodical way to map it out before rolling it out on a broad scale to something like an SAP process. Although you may have small teams that are involved in making updates and changes to SAP that could certainly begin the process of adopting it. But unless you have a really very, very clear vision of exactly how you'll develop DevOps, I think rolling out initially to a very large team is a real challenge. I'm sure it can be done, but my advocacy is to start small, perfect it before you move on to large-scale operations.
Okay, thanks, Dan. The next question on the list here is, what are one or two things do you think that are key for implementing DevOps culture in an organization? And I'm okay maybe starting out with this. Dan, please chime in if you've got any other additions to add. But for me, from my perspective, it's really the collaboration piece. You got to really knock down those silos and be able to communicate and talk from the BAs to the developers to the testers through to the operations people, and be sharing information constantly so that there are no surprises, everybody knows what's happening. And then the other thing, the second point I'd probably add is just, making people accountable for the quality of what they deliver. Everyone from the people writing the requirements to, ensure that they are writing a requirement that is testable, to developers that are developing code and that, so that they take pride in their work and ensure that they're delivering quality pieces of code that work from a unit perspective. And then obviously testing, ensuring that the quality of the whole application is working. And then lastly, the operations team, they've got to ensure that they step up and collaborate with the whole project team to learn the changes and updates or the new application that's being implemented to ensure that they can support and provide the necessary responsiveness when supporting the application.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jeremy. There's no question. I think everyone has to be on board up front. If you have any part of that equation that is resistant or not completely invested in the result, then you'll have a problem. And this means that everyone owns the end result. It's no longer where the development's job is done when they hand it off to QA until something comes back. But everybody is invested in the final result. The only other thing that I would add to what Jamie has just said is that I think that it requires some level of executive support. Because I don't think you achieve the better, faster, cheaper on perhaps the first iteration. There is some process refinement that takes place, and people get better as they go along. So having executive support for making these changes and ensuring that everyone is completely on board with the process and the result is a critical success factors to make this work.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Another question on the board here is, with outsourcing, developers can be literally worldwide. Any strategies on implementing DevOps when the team members may be in different countries, time zones?
Yeah, I think that's very common. There's no question. Even non-outsourced people tend to be dispersed. I can tell you from my personal experience, I have a development team that spans all throughout North America, Canada, and a very large group in India. So we face the exact same issues that you just described. And it comes down to, again, people commitment. We talked a little bit earlier about platforms, having commonality of platform so that it facilitates rather than inhibits communication. We talked a little bit about having the right ALM structure where the same data, results, information is available to all team members. It doesn't solve the issue of time, distance, and time zones, but the platform itself lends into that. And I think many development organizations today operate in that kind of environment where people are dispersed across various continents and find ways to work. The integration of this process just means that you have an added challenge of trying to bring everybody on the same page. But again, just identifying that these are important issues to do and ensuring you have that buy-in up front and have the right platforms to support that collaborative environment, make that work.
And just to add on to what Dan had to say, in my previous experiences and stuff, I ran across, I won't mention any names, but there was a big movie studio that employed a consulting firm that used offshore resources to do all their test automation for them. And one of their big things was just to make that outsourcing team feel like they were truly part of the company and knew what the company objectives were and goals and be a part of it. The movie studio actually would take over to India and give the outsourcing team the opportunity to see movies before they were released to the general public and stuff like that. So it gave them that sense of camaraderie and was able to make them feel really a part of the company in knowing what the company is wanting to deliver and provide. They're feeling that collaboration and being a part of the actual company and team to that they're working for and working so hard to deliver quality testing for them and stuff. So just another example. Okay, another question that we have on the board here is from someone just asking if he's correct that there is a big upfront time commitment to build the components and that the time savings will be down the line due to reuse. And again, I'll try and take a stab at this, Dan, if you want to chime in with anything I missed. But yeah, you are correct. I mean, like anything, nothing is for free, right? You've got to put the effort up front and time and commitment to build that. But then you ultimately reap these benefits down the road as you go through multiple iterations, multiple sprints, whatever it is, where you're reusing the components and test cases that you build. And that's the nice thing about the Turnkey C-Factory tool, is it's easily maintainable. It's just basically a button click and you're able to update your components, and they're reflected out across all of your test cases with basically a button click. So, putting that upfront time and effort into it to build a framework, an automation framework in the test cases, you're going to reap huge benefits down the road.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think that it's a great question. As I said, it's an investment. An investment generally means that you have some upfront costs to get there. That's why having clear purpose and clear objectives are really important. There are statistics that indicate that the cost of quality when not integrating QA into a DevOps initiative increases rather than decreases, from roughly 18% to up to 30%. So, there's huge gains to be had. I also think that without this eye on integrated quality, I use an aerospace term. When you're focused just on speed of delivery, it's sort of all thrust, no vector. And, that means is you just speed in the process of crashing into the wall. The quality focus has to stay there. This is where you drive a ton of your savings. As Jamie indicated, it's massively cheaper to find a defect early in the process, fix it then at the end of the process. So clearly the business case is there to make this happen, but the upfront investment really is less in tools, but more in people and processes, and figuring out how to make it work in your environment. If you have a clear focus, clear objectives, and you have buy-in from the team, I think that can happen very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Again, going back to our list of questions, what decides about what is meaningful to be who decides about what is meaningful to be tested? Sorry. Well, I can take a stab at this one. Basically, in an ideal world, it should be your QA-infused DevOps team, right? It should be everyone involved to help decide that. Everyone from the BAs, obviously they're going to have an idea of what is business critical, what are their day-to-day business processes that they need to be able to perform without failure in that. But then again, you've got development in there as well, who knows, what was the more difficult code to build and could potentially have the most failures or issues in it. And then obviously testing has their perspective as well. And, as testing experts, they can have a feel for, where applications tend to fall down and that. And so, and obviously as well, I think operations, they have a sense, supporting the application day to day. They see the help desk tickets that come in and know what the issues they currently see, so they can provide that in. So, in an ideal world, I think you want to take input from every group and team to provide that. But I think maybe the ultimate trump card, I think, would lie in the business analysts or the business users that are designing and implementing the system, in my mind.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of breaking down these silos. The team makes the decision, and you have a much better decision as a result of having each of those unique vantage points and each of those various expertise levels contribute to that decision. And I've found over the years that where you have ineffective testing, it's often because you're testing the wrong thing or things that aren't important. And the blending of these various areas into a single common group that makes decisions, I think, gives you much better results.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I know we're getting close on time here, but we'll try and get one more in. Do you try and automate new functionality introduced in a sprint to be used during that sprint, or try and stay one sprint behind? So I can take a stab at this first here, and it really depends. Some agile practitioners have a done is done approach to ending a sprint. Others have a hard date stop. If yours follows the former, you wouldn't say you're done until you had automated tests running. C-Factory is quick. You can get automation a lot quicker than scripting, so getting to done is possible. If you consistently are rolling items over the time limit for a sprint, perhaps it's best if you stay one sprint behind.
Great. We'll probably have time for maybe one more. Let's do one more and we'll do a wrap up.
Okay. Last one I've got here. Let's see. So you specifically mentioned functional testing. Do you include performance testing as part of DevOps as well? Would you be able to answer that one, Dan, on this?
Yeah, there are a wide variety of various testing disciplines, and this is why one of the traps that I see people as they go into DevOps is to trivialize testing. But if you think about all the various forms, not just functional testing, performance testing, and unit testing, I mean, there's so many different things that have to be or should be done that blending in that expertise to the process is absolutely essential. So all of the different various types of testing that are required to have a performance application of high quality to support the organization needs have to be included in that process. So again, one of the traps I see is people tend to say, well, we can sprinkle some testing throughout the process and then push applications out. And that's simply not the case. It's more of an integration. And all of those disciplines should be exercised, just as you would today.
All right.
I would like to thank everyone. Oh, sorry. I'd like to thank everyone for your participation today. We certainly appreciate it. Hopefully you found value. I'd like to remind you that you can click on and download the white paper from your control panel. I'd also like to make sure that everyone's aware and extend an invitation to everyone to attend and participate in Discover 2016, held, of course, in beautiful Las Vegas from June 7th through the 9th. You'll see on the link, let's see if I can find it here. If you use the Vivid registration link at the bottom of the page, there's a member discount associated with that, so make sure that you use that. We'll be there. We'd love to see you, and you'll see a lot of different practitioners and approaches that support this whole notion of integration of DevOps into your environment. So again, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. But that will conclude our presentation.